Right now is a great time to be a fan of My Hero Academia. The manga is at a high point, and the anime is going into one of my favorite arcs in the series. How about we rewind though, back to season 1 of My Hero Academia. There's a reoccurring argument in the anime community as to whether or not there's a difference between American cartoons that are inspired by anime and anime made in Japan. And the general consensus, time after time, tends to be that anime isn't an American thing, and it's not made in America. But frick frack that consensus, bro. Avatar The Last Airbender was amazing, Teen Titans was amazing, and the original Ben 10 was also amazing. On top of that, I've been a fan of Marvel and DC since before I could remember. And while in my later years of life I've definitely dropped it a lot and I'm not as interested as I once was, it still holds a very close place in my heart. And that is why My Hero Academia is the missing link for not just me, but so many others who enjoyed superheroes in American media. And if that wasn't enough to tell you that this was heavily inspired by American nerd culture, there's all the subtle Star Wars references. Now, I'm not going to tell you that My Hero Academia was the first series to make this huge cross into Western culture. That would be way too much disrespect to amazing series like Cowboy Bebop and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. My Hero simply scratched an itch that wasn't being scratched yet. And while I do praise the concept of My Hero Academia, it is definitely not without its flaws. One of its biggest flaws, in my opinion, being the fact that it will regularly hype you up for plot development, and then instead of plot development, you get lunch, high school lunch. They eat lunch at school. The manga already did this a little bit, which wasn't much of a problem really, but the anime added a little bit more, and that's, again, not too much of a problem as long as you enjoy that type of thing, but it's almost like they know they do it. For example, in the latest episode, which is a season 5 thing, they start an episode with seeing Shigiraki, with a tease of the League of Villains arc, which is a very exciting arc in my opinion. You know what that episode was about? Christmas. The episode was about Christmas. And interviews. The extent of the plot development in the first season was basically Deku got powers, started going to UA, stuff happened at UA, and then they got invaded by the League of Villains. The rest of it was just school life. And I understand there's an audience for that, but that isn't what makes My Hero Academia stick out. So personally, I'm not a huge fan of the first season, being that they didn't really play too much on it being something that was so different from what we had in anime at the time. They stuck a little bit too close to the school life, which is something we actually get a lot in anime. And like I said, I respect that there's an audience for that, but there's a lot of anime for that audience. And I personally find it to be one of the weaker points of My Hero Academia, being that a lot of those other anime about school life, in my opinion, there's many that do it better. So for me, My Hero Academia is at its peak when it's not about school life, and when it's about them being heroes. Fortunately, I can say that is where the series leads, and ultimately, you get quite a lot of it. I do think My Hero Academia Season 1 was the least enjoyable season, but I do understand the reason why it had to be. Now let me explain. In the early episodes of any shonen, there tends to be a decent slow time where you're just coming to get to know the protagonist. In My Hero Academia, they want you to know an entire class. That takes time. Of course, in my shonen, I love it when we can get to know the characters in heart-pounding action. For example, Black Clover does this well, introducing a fairly large cast. Not quite as large, but they introduce it without really slowing down the plot at all. They just keep things happening as you get to know these very interesting characters. But My Hero doesn't really have the luxury of doing that, being that they're students in a school, which dictates that they do school stuff, which makes it feel less like Marvel and DC and more like Sky High. I mean, no disrespect to Sky High, but it's not Marvel and DC. So ultimately, I think the first season does decent on character development and really lacks in plot development. So if you love you some quick progression, I'm sorry, look somewhere else. And after watching the first season, I'm so thankful Deku doesn't cry that much anymore. Like, it's painful. It's painful. Like, happening once or twice is fine, but it doesn't stop. The waterworks constantly. It doesn't stop. No. I believe My Hero owes its spot in the limelight to the itch it scratched for many audience, but it gets progressively better season to season, so if you're in it for the long run, you'll be rewarded. If you just watch a season or two, well, hopefully you're into school stuff. I give the first season of My Hero Academia a lackluster start to a good series with a kick-ass finale. This has been Kaihan, and I'll see you on the way down the abyss next time.